The promise of the Wolfpack. March 10, 1943. The North Atlantic, hundreds of miles west of Ireland. The interior of Type WWII U-boat U-333 is a cold, damp, metallic tomb. You are crammed shoulder to shoulder with the crew, inhaling the close air, a cocktail of diesel fumes, sweat, and recycled oxygen. The sound is an oppressive symphony of pressure, the relentless ping of the active sonar from the enemy's escort vessels far above, the rhythmic thump of the electric motors, and the constant, high-pitched groan of the steel hull battling the immense pressure of the deep Atlantic. Above the noise, the voice of the commander, Captain Lieutenant Peter Kramer, is a low, controlled growl. Kramer is an Iron Man of the U-boat service, a veteran of numerous patrols who embodies the confident ruthlessness of Donnett's Wolfpack. It is the peak of the second happy time. Despite early setbacks in the war, 1942 and the early months of 1943 saw the German U-boat arm achieve devastating success. The U-boats ranged with impunity off the American coast and into the mid-Atlantic, finding the convoys soft targets, lacking sufficient air cover or effective countermeasures. The Wolfpack, a coordinated group of submarines attacking simultaneously on the surface at night, was the apex predator of the sea. U-333 is currently submerged, resting beneath the thermal layer, a temperature boundary in the water that helps mask the boat from the primitive sonar of the British and American escort groups. They are waiting for the twilight attack. Kramer is hunting convoy HX-229, a huge, slow-moving formation of tankers and freighters lumbering east toward Britain. Kramer looks at the chart spread out on his tiny table, illuminated by a single red lamp. He knows the strategic reality. Every sunken ton of Allied shipping delays the invasion of Europe and starves Britain. This mission is vital. Periscope depth, Kramer commands quietly. The boat eases upward, ballast tanks whistling. A few tense minutes later, Kramer raises the attack periscope. The world shifts from the murky blue of the deep to a clear, gray horizon. He sweeps the lens. The convoy is there, a staggering line of 30 or 40 ships, massive targets silhouetted against the dimming sky. But something is different. The escort screen is tighter than expected, and Kramer notices a faint, unsettling flicker on the horizon, too far to be a visual threat, yet new. He lowers the periscope, his face betraying a flicker of unease, which he quickly masks. Targets are immense. 2 destroyers and 3 corvettes on the perimeter, but the range is good. We surface at 2,300 hours. The Wolfpack will take them from all sides. Prepare for surface attack, battery recharge, and diesel power. The plan is the established doctrine of success. Use the high surface speed of the U-boat to outrun the escorts, get ahead of the convoy, and attack multiple ships with torpedoes, then submerge. It is a plan born of confidence. Confidence that the darkness is their friend, that the Allied technology is easily evaded, and that the U-boat is still the stealthiest, most powerful weapon in the Atlantic. The men smile, excited by the promise of the tonnage and the confidence of their captain. They do not know that, far away in the United States and Britain, scientists and engineers have been working feverishly, quietly implementing 3 devastating innovations that are about to turn their hunting ground into a graveyard. The year is 1943. The tide is already turning, though the U-boat commanders do not yet know the ocean has suddenly grown eyes and ears. The evolving ocean floor. The year is 1943. The tide is already turning, though the U-boat commanders do not yet know the ocean has suddenly grown eyes and ears. As the electric motors of U-333 hummed, maintaining station below the thermal layer, the darkness that Captain Lieutenant Kramer relied upon was already being defeated miles away. The confident belief in the U-boat's stealth was based on outdated information. The Allies had achieved a technological breakthrough that effectively nullified the U-boat's primary defense: invisibility. The first devastating innovation was the widespread deployment of centimetric radar, specifically the British Type 271 and the American S-band radar. Earlier radar systems, operating on longer wavelengths, could not reliably detect the low profile of a surfaced U-boat. But the new 10 cm wavelength radar achieved much greater resolution. For the first time, Allied escort vessels could accurately detect a surface submarine, even in rough weather or total darkness, at ranges up to 5 miles. Simultaneously, the air cover for convoys had become lethal. No longer relying solely on short-range patrols from coastal bases, convoys were increasingly protected by escort carriers, CVEs, small, hastily converted aircraft carriers that brought air patrols deep into the mid-Atlantic gap. These aircraft were equipped with a miniaturized version of the new radar, the ASV Mark II and later the ASV Mark III, giving them the same all-weather, all-night vision as the ships. The third development was in detection under the water. The Allies had perfected high-frequency direction finding, HFDF, nicknamed Huff-Duff. This technology could triangulate the position of a U-boat the moment it used its radio transmitter to report convoy position back to Admiral Donitz or to coordinate a Wolfpack attack. What had been a necessary part of the Wolfpack tactic now instantly revealed the U-boat's location to the nearest escort group. Kramer and his crew, however, were still operating on 1942 doctrine. At 2,300 hours, U-333 rose to the surface, the diesel engines kicking in with a comforting roar, instantly giving the boat flank speed. Kramer ordered a quick radio signal to Donitz, confirming the convoy location and requesting a coordinated attack. That signal, necessary to orchestrate the Wolfpack, was the first fatal error. Within minutes of transmission, the radio officer on the nearest British destroyer, HMS Hesperus, had plotted the U-boat's bearing. Kramer was confident. It was a dark night, and he was on the surface, moving fast toward his attack position. He ordered his watch officer to scan the horizon. There was nothing visual. They were invisible. They were safe. Then, the world shattered. A bright, powerful searchlight snapped on from the darkness, followed immediately by the roaring sound of aircraft engines closing fast. The surface attack had lasted less than 3 minutes. Kramer instinctively screamed the order, "Emergency dive. All ahead slow." The blinding light of destruction. Then, the world shattered. A bright, powerful searchlight snapped on from the darkness, followed immediately by the roaring sound of aircraft engines closing fast. The surface attack had lasted less than 3 minutes. Kramer instinctively screamed the order, "Emergency dive. All ahead slow." The sheer speed and violence of the counterattack were unprecedented. The searchlight blinding Kramer and the watch officer wasn't from a destroyer. It was from a Vought TBF Avenger torpedo bomber flying off the escort carrier, HMS Biter. The Avenger had caught U-333 not by chance, but by technology. Its ASV Mark III radar, operating on the centimetric wavelength, had tracked the U-boat's brief radar signature from 10 miles out, despite the darkness and low profile. The searchlight, known as the Lee Light, was the final, brutal innovation. Mounted beneath the Avenger's wing, this incredibly powerful light was only switched on during the last terrifying moments of an attack run, too late for the U-boat crew to gain any meaningful visual fix on the aircraft or even train their flak guns. It was designed to turn the night, the U-boat's greatest protector, into a deadly spotlight. Kramer scrambled down the conning tower hatch, slamming it shut just as the U-boat began its agonizingly slow descent. He felt the sickening lurch as the Avenger, flying dangerously low, dropped its first weapon. Not a torpedo, but a string of depth charges. The blast, muffled by the water but still concussive, hammered the hull. Lights flickered, gauges rattled wildly, and a plume of water leaked from a joint in the control room. The attack wasn't over. The Avenger circled and delivered a second, more accurate run. Below the surface, the ping of the escort sonar became frantic and dangerously close. Kramer knew that the moment he transmitted his coordinates via Huff-Duff, he had sealed his fate. He had given away his position not just to the nearest destroyer, but to the eyes in the sky. The subsequent hours were a nightmare of deep evasion. Kramer pushed U-333 to its absolute crush depth, desperately trying to use the deep water as a shield. The Allied escorts, HMS Hesperus and a few corvettes, were now guided by the aircraft's pinpoint positioning. They systematically hunted the U-boat, dropping a sustained, crushing pattern of hedgehog anti-submarine mortars, which detonated only on contact, and traditional depth charges that bracketed the U-boat. This was not the cat-and-mouse game of 1941. This was a murder hunt, orchestrated by technology. The convoy, which was the target, sailed on unimpeded, leaving the U-boat trapped in a kill zone. Kramer realized, with chilling clarity, that the rules of the Atlantic War had fundamentally changed while they were underwater. He was no longer the hunter, he was cornered prey. The confident Wolfpack doctrine demanded surface coordination and speed. Both were now invitations to instantaneous death. The collapse of doctrine and the Wolfpack's retreat. This was a murder hunt, orchestrated by technology. The convoy, which was the target, sailed on unimpeded, leaving the U-boat trapped in a kill zone. Kramer realized, with chilling clarity, that the rules of the Atlantic War had fundamentally changed while they were underwater. He was no longer the hunter, he was cornered prey. The confident Wolfpack doctrine demanded surface coordination and speed. Both were now invitations to instantaneous death. After nearly 6 hours of relentless attack, With depth charges rocking the boat into a near wreck and the internal atmosphere growing toxic from electrical fires and stale air, Captain Lieutenant Kramer managed to limp U-333 away. He utilized the last reserves of battery power and the cover of a passing squall, slipping silently and deeply into the vastness of the mid-Atlantic. When they finally surfaced hours later, far from the convoy, the silence was profound. The watch officer, seeing the undamaged surface of the ocean and the clear horizon, initially felt relief. Kramer, however, was broken. His primary mission, to sink tonnage, was a failure. More importantly, his understanding of the war was shattered. He realized the strategic genius behind the new Allied system. It wasn't one single technology, but the integration of technologies that created a constant, inescapable kill chain. Huff-Duff pulled the U-boat out of strategic hiding. Centimetric radar denied the U-boat the cover of darkness. Escort carriers brought the decisive force, the aircraft, into the mid-Atlantic gap. The Lee light denied the U-boat the vital second needed to man its flak defenses. The enemy now hunted U-boats, not just defended convoys. The experience was replicated across the Atlantic in March and April 1943. Other Wolfpack commanders, relying on the same outdated surface attack doctrine, met similar or worse fates. U-boat losses spiked dramatically in a period known to the German Navy as Black May, where over 40 U-boats were lost in a single month, an unsustainable loss rate that crippled the Kriegsmarine's submarine arm. Kramer's internal report to Donitz following the patrol was filled with the stark details of the new reality. He confirmed the unbelievable accuracy of the airborne radar and the terrifying efficacy of the Lee light. It was an admission that the core tactic of the Wolfpack, the coordinated night surface attack, was strategically obsolete. The laugh was gone. The professional confidence replaced by a chilling fear. The conviction that the U-boat was the master of the sea was replaced by the realization that they were effectively blind targets in a newly illuminated environment. Kramer's surfacing near convoy HX-229 became an early, definitive data point in a strategic disaster. He had survived the collapse of the Wolfpack era, but many of his comrades would not. The German High Command faced a painful choice: continue the high-risk hunt under obsolete doctrine, or recall the U-boats entirely. The aftermath and the final verdict. Kramer surfacing near convoy HX-229 became an early, definitive data point in a strategic disaster. He had survived the collapse of the Wolfpack era, but many of his comrades would not. The German High Command faced a painful choice: continue the high-risk hunt under obsolete doctrine, or recall the U-boats entirely. Admiral Karl Donitz, the architect of the Wolfpack strategy, received the grim reports from Captain Lieutenant Kramer and dozens of other surviving commanders throughout the spring of 1943. The pattern was undeniable. The moment a U-boat surfaced or transmitted a signal, it was tracked, illuminated, and destroyed. The integrated Allied countermeasures had achieved a perfect technological counter to the U-boat's strength. The decision was made with brutal finality. In May 1943, Donitz was forced to withdraw the majority of the U-boat fleet from the crucial North Atlantic convoy routes. The strategic objective, starving Britain and halting the Allied buildup, was now unattainable at any acceptable cost. This recall was the strategic turning point of the Battle of the Atlantic, effectively handing victory to the Allies. The legacy of the incident involving U-333 and convoy HX-229 was that it provided a crystal-clear case study proving the obsolescence of World War II-era surface doctrine. The German reaction was immediate and desperate. They initiated an urgent, yet costly and ultimately fruitless, technological race to regain stealth. German engineers scrambled to introduce innovations like the snorkel, which allowed U-boats to run their diesel engines and recharge batteries while submerged at periscope depth, thereby avoiding the need to surface entirely. They also worked on new radar-absorbent coatings and advanced, high-speed Type XXI U-boats, electroboats. However, these were solutions born of desperation, not strategic initiative. They consumed vast resources and entered the war far too late to influence the outcome. The time needed to retrofit the existing Type WWII fleet with snorkels meant that for over a year, U-boats were effectively denied access to the critical hunting grounds. Captain Lieutenant Peter Kramer, having survived the most dangerous phase of the Atlantic War, became a living witness to the collapse of German naval dominance. His initial confidence, shattered by the Lee light and centimetric radar, became a microcosm of the German Navy's fate. The U-boats never again posed an existential threat to Allied shipping. The confident happy time was over, replaced by a grim war of survival. The strategic initiative, once firmly held by the hunter, was now decisively in the hands of the prey.